sharing insights and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin, as always. Thursday nights, 10 p.m. to midnight. Thank you for joining. The electrified skies continue across the planet as now the umpteenth iteration or chapter of floods across the Middle East. Hailstones the size of golf balls in Saudi Arabia that became so thick that camels appeared to be walking through snow. Softball grapefruit size hail plus across China for the third time in just a week. We got a volcanic eruption, Mount Ruang in Indonesia, 2 degrees north latitude, 87,000 foot eruption, pure ash. And it just goes on and on. The quake window is open. The volcanic explosivity window is open. And the extreme weather we're starting to see is just the beginning of the electromagnetic effects that will spook most of the intensity and the amplification. So, Ransom, I'm glad you're joining me tonight. There's so much to talk about. I mean, if it's not the politics and this and that, it is now completely food prices, non-planting, and this global phenomenon of thunderous skies. And, let me I forgot my one point here. In the UK or England, we'll call it Southern England, millions of people were awakened to thunder so loud that they thought their houses were going to shake in on themselves, and people became extremely frightened. Millions, plural, millions, from this electrified thunder reverberating frequency change, I guess, booms that were coming through the sky. That all happened earlier today, and a friend of mine in the UK gave me the story. But wherever you look, the extremes are becoming so extreme that, how are global governments going to start to cover this up, or at least give excuses so people aren't going to absolutely panic from the next time another weather front comes through? So anyway, there's so much to talk about on many, many fronts, man. Floor is absolutely yours, Ransom. Welcome.
I don't know if this is going to be the year, but, we're always talking about what are you going to do if this happens and if that happens. And, the whole spectrum, the last couple of years that we've been on the radio talking, or at least me and you together, really before that, I'm sure, each year had its devastating events. And it seems like no matter what happens, the other portion of people that it didn't happen to directly, they never get the hint. So they just think, oh, that's sad, and they look at it on the news and they think that's horrible, and they send their thoughts and prayers and all of that kind of stuff, and that's great. But nobody ever prepares, and you've been seeing these tornadoes touching down all over the U.S. Oh, man, that is exactly, or for me, the reason that I left the South, and I didn't want to live in Texas or Oklahoma or Nebraska or any of those states. That just, number one, knocked it off for me. And then you got, the coastal regions, which I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of tears again this year. And, even the mainstream meteorologists are predicting that this is going to be a year with a lot of named storms coming in and causing devastation. And now you're going to add volcanoes and earthquakes on top of that. And, there's been a lot of activity. You got Etna with its smoke rings going up, and I forgot what the volcano you were just talking about. All kinds of them in the last couple of years, kind of since Tonga really got my attention, because, that was a massive explosion, and people just don't really get that if that was anywhere near, a metropolis, say something like that. I know it's not a different kind of volcano and everything, but say something like that happened to Mount Fuji, or over here in the States, we had the Mount St. Helens, but what if Mount Rainier or one of those other ones pop and go towards the direction of like Seattle and Portland and all of that kind of stuff, and then what if it all happens simultaneously within the same couple of years? What are we actually looking at? And that would be terrifying to hear roaring thunder where you don't necessarily usually hear it like that. They used to have some really strong thunderstorms where I live here in New Mexico, but I've been looking at the strikes map, and that little section of magnetivity, I guess, if I didn't say that right. But anyway, that whole stretch seems to have just moved over several hundred miles more into the central United States, which happens to be Tornado Alley as well. And then, we were joking kind of the last show about the psychic predictions of, I forgot the blind lady, I forgot her name now, but, she had the
Baba
big,
Gita or something like that.
yeah, right. And she had the super prediction for this year about the New Madrid fault there. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but when will the world actually realize that with all the turmoil on top of it that's human created, and I'm not talking about global warming, obviously, I'm talking about kinetic warfare and, the shutting down of food distribution networks that we've come accustomed to in the last several decades, as it seemed like we were headed for a world of peace and trade and negotiation and things like that. And now we see that that is not their plan. Their plan is something different. It's destabilization. It's the distribution of wealth. It's also the recreation of society altogether. And, last week and the week before, I brought up, and this is kind of woo woo for you, but
Oh,
I
I
was
like
sitting,
woo, man. It's a Thursday night of woo.
right. So I was sitting on my porch the other night thinking about this because I was trying to get all of the technologies together that are revolutionary as far as reading the human mind. So we have machines now that can read text, or excuse me, write text of what you're thinking, the words in your head. We have machines that can show the image that you're thinking of. Now, this sounds, anecdotally funny or neat or, whatever, but we know what's going on with the domain of human activity, and that's complete biometrics controlled by AI. And I was thinking, if we have these rudimentary programs and machines and technologies, imagine what an extraterrestrial race that would be visiting or maybe even part of world governance. And that's really woo woo. But just think about how fast they could read your thoughts if those same type of technologies got to run their course of advancement over decades or hundreds of years or thousands of years even. I mean, just think about that concept. If somebody has that big of a head start on technology altogether, we're not just talking about anti-gravitics and things like that, but also the other realm of technologies like mind reading and interconnection between AI, machines, and mind reading. And what do they always say in these UFO stories? But that the little dudes inside there are, connecting with the ship and driving it with their minds. And when they talk to people, supposedly it's usually telepathic. And, I always thought that was kind of corny until, I added the idea of AI and technology. And now, if we're talking about those machines are in our realm of reality now, imagine how far they've advanced behind closed doors, in the black budget projects. And then also, where did they either get it from or where is it going? Those are all good questions. But really, you want to know how far have they got with it now, because it's not much to take those technologies, combine them, and put them on the little policing drones that they plan on putting everywhere. And I just got to see the what was it, the CEO of BlackRock talking about how it's a good thing that the population is declining in many areas and many countries, because that's okay, because they're going to replace the human worker with an artificial one. And then supposedly, like all dystopic dreams start out, it'll be for your benefit, for your service. It'll make technology better. Now, in the case of Japan and other cities that are, kind of ahead of the game as far as that goes, I would say that they have a good, a good kind of concept of what it can be, the positive aspects, but at the same time, they just admitted to signing a bill to, or not a bill, but an agreement kind of to help Europe in their complete surveillance of their citizens. So you get to see both blades of this thing. And now we're talking about complete surveillance, complete tracking, and now the ability literally to read your mind, your motivations, your feelings, and much more than that. What you've done, where you've been, opinions you may have had before that you no longer have, or things like that. You imagine the type of suffering sessions, or what do they call them? Now combine that with this Marxist revolution that's going on, that's being funded by these same technocratic elite that are on the top of everything. They're the ones that are funding the kind of the bottom up destruction of civilization. And if you've been watching the universities in the United States, you know that those are not A, centers for learning any longer. B, they're centers for debt collection and redistribution of wealth. These are the people that believe a lot of the time that you should, pay their bills, or share your money or your property or your hard-earned way of life that you have. You should give that over to them because they chose to go down a different intellectual path with their life. So those useful idiots, now combined with these mega donors that are funding it all over the world, and this links into destabilization and actual kinetic war, which, by the way, are now operating with AI, basically what I guess you could call boots on the ground, right? We have now kill bots in several theaters of war around the world. Not only that, we have certain countries that are going ahead and admitting that they're allowing the AI to decide which target it's going to, annihilate based on this or that. Now, we are also at the peak of our genetic sciences. So all you have to do is just think about these ideas for a second, and you can realize that if there is any nefarious conspiracies out there that are racial based or technological based against, just the poverty itself, they have the upper hand right now. And people just do not see what's coming. And I guarantee that, because when I go anywhere now or travel anywhere, all I see are phone zombies. And I know that those phone zombies have some weird geopolitical ideas of the world because they're directly fed those from different sources. Now imagine that source can now not only, project propaganda and ideas outward towards the public, but find and analyze and target those individuals who registered with bad thoughts or thought crimes or differences of opinion. And this is reality. And while you kind of come back to that, how about that all coalescing at the same time? Nature's patterns, the AI singularity of the new reset, and, just all around destabilization of the world. And these elite openly admitting that, yes, we're being depopulated. Sometimes lately, it seems like the elite can't help themselves but to say the quiet parts out loud.
Well, the cycle's repeating as we speak. So obviously everything's going to be reset. There can be nothing left of a vestige of the old world as we move into this new world. What would you leave from the old world to bring to the new? Because people would cling to that part of the old world that they remember most. That was the same thing in the Cultural Revolution, for those of you in China, knowing about the history there. They destroyed everything they tried to, including the revamping a writing system from traditional Chinese that was used in Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, and changing the entire language to simplify it. So it had nothing to do with the old world. They even went that far to create a new writing language from the same Chinese characters, but a new version of the written from thousands of years before. Anything that there was there, anything of old norms, old stories, old legends, anything that was antiques, it was all broken and destroyed. And those who could remember and recite were demonized, executed, or went to those struggle sessions as you talk about. Now, that is a very small microcosm of what is happening and what has happened, because, as I traveled over in Italy, what I noticed was when we changed ages from Aries into Pisces some 2,000 years ago, those of you might recognize that as the birth of Christ, that time period, everything that was there at the time was broken and destroyed as much as humanly possible. Not the buildings per se, but the vestiges of statues. And that people always ask, did you see any paintings from, 1,100 years ago, 15, 1,800 years ago? No, everything was destroyed. I mean, everything. Even the marble statues. That's why they always, gouged out the crystals from the eyes, broke off all the fingers, every digit was broken off. They broke the legs, took the feet off. They did everything. Arms came off. They, everything's all chipped on the faces. They broke all the noses off, chipped all the ears off. They just completely damaged and destroyed everything of the old age. And that is one thing I absolutely unequivocally believe is as we come into this new age, there will be nothing left of our old world to cling to, because you can't cling to something old. They want you to start anew, and you completely forget yourself, your identity, your nationality, and you start fresh, where this whole new set of rules of what you can talk about, what you can't talk about, what you can believe, what you cannot believe, and your whole mind reading thing comes in here. The Borg, well, it's very much, you're covering the surface of our planet with solar panels, for one thing. Cavitating and gyrating nature left, right, and center with all these windmills everywhere. And all the audacity to block the sun because of a gas that's called plant food. And they've actually taken it to the point where they've brainwashed everybody so heavily and indoctrinated them that they're cheering the blocking of the sunlight. Like if that's not terraforming from a different species to block out our sunlight and remove our trees and fauna, megafauna, I don't know what is not. So as we come through this transitional cycle here, AI, is it an entity? Yes, it is. It's sentient? Yes, I'm sure it is. Is it where we are today? Absolutely not. It's probably 50 years ahead. And what we see with ChatGPT and all these different things and DALL-E and all these, image softwares that we're using is nothing. I mean, that was a 50-year-old version compare. Imagine like Windows 1947 or something. Equivalent is what ChatGPT and all these things that you're looking at now. That's like Windows 1952. That's truly where it sits. And then I look here, and another thing, as we come into this reset for economy, I was listening to Mike Adams because I'm going to be on an interview with him. He wants to know about all the inflation that I experienced when I was traveling over these few months. And I couldn't believe it. Even Japan, Ransom, as I had talked about, just being outrageously ridiculous on the exchange rate, 150 yen to a dollar. Even over the week since we spoke last, it went to 160 yen to the dollar. I mean, these are absurd numbers here. This is really where it gets into, mind-bending inflation, where people can't cope. And there's going to be a reworking or a reevaluation of societal norms of what's truly correct or incorrect, what's right, what's wrong. Because if you can't feed yourself or feed your family, then is theft something that, the facial recognition cameras are going up everywhere in England now. You know why? And they're putting them at supermarkets and on the corners of supermarkets first to try to catch repeat offenders of food theft. The UK is down 20% in its planting, and they're predicting far more because it still continues to be soggy, that they're warning UK citizens prices are going to skyrocket. But then everything was cool for the minute. And yeah, steal as much as you want, unchecked crime. Gee, I think that sounds familiar here too. Same in the UK. But now suddenly they care because it's supermarkets being targeted. And you see how there was allowed to be, and then suddenly the crackdowns come. Oh, you can't say that, you can't be there, you can't protest this, you can't steal that, can't burn this anymore. It used to be good a few years ago. But that's the most insane thing, that all of this rollout of facial technology, recognition camera technologies in the UK is going to be for supermarkets first. And they broadcast that the food prices are going to go ballistically skyrocketing. And the one thing that's not really mentioned, and I was saying, I'm going to be with Mike Adams. I was listening to him when he's like, listen to this one. We don't have a food production system if we don't have lines of credit for the farmers. Our farms work on get your seed, get your fuel, get your fertilizer, repair parts, your machinery, everything's on credit. On credit. That means the banks need to be functional and have the ability to write loans to farmers. I really don't know very many that could go hand to mouth for a full year or two with no credit. Nobody has that much seed. And then you have to have insurance in case, there's a locust plague coming in, a 7-year locust, and I think a 21-year locust or something like this is supposed to be coming out simultaneously here in East Tennessee in a few more weeks. So what happens with the crop insurance? If they lose everything, and if they were on their own cash dime with no insurance, like it would be in a complete economic evaporation, they would have no insurance, and then what they grew is what they could keep for seed for next year, and what they grew is what they could have to sell. And if their machines broke, then what if they even had fuel? This is all predicated, truly it is, like our world stops if the banking system stops. There will be no credit for the farmers. And that's the biggest thing to write home about. They try to spook you with, oh, your bank account will be confiscated. Oh, there'll be burglars in the night coming through. There'll be gangs and marauding. Okay. That's child's play in terms of a full famine where no food gets grown. And you take a look at what happened in the Ukraine back in the Holodomor, or what happened in China during the Great Leap Forward, and these different chapters of famines. Ethiopia, you ever hear the remember that Sally Struthers, give a kid $1 a day, way back in the 80s. These kind of famines are real. And when they come, and if you don't have any way to procure, you have no money, you get nothing. And right now, America is the least liked team in the entire block. If you look out there, the way we weaponized our dollar, the way we weaponize weapons, and the way we just continue this war machine, and we just export death and destruction, people are no longer having it. They're so sick of it, and they're not absolutely going to participate with us any longer. So if you're hearing my words and you are in the United States, we are being firewalled off for the rest of the world. You might go, well, that's impossible because we have other banks. No, they've already set up parallel systems of SWIFT, so they don't need that any longer. They're setting up parallel trade amongst themselves with real world assets, and otherwise known as trading a good for a good, raw materials for raw materials. They're setting up a secondary gold and silver backed currency, and now China told everybody buy silver in the country. So now there's a silver shortage going to sweep the planet because they only had 250 million ounces. Get this. China, everybody, they were told in the beginning, they told everybody buy 1 gram of gold. So they have had so much gold come into China. It was up 40% even last month coming through Hong Kong. That's how much gold they're importing in China. Shanghai Gold Exchange dominates world trade right now, pricing and everything. Like we've lost it over in the West. So there was so much gold coming in, and then, whoa, okay, well, you guys need to slow down on the gold. The central bank needs more, so hold off on the gold purchases. So now they're sending it through the media in the last 2 weeks. Buy silver. They're telling the citizens of China over there, switch from gold to start buying silver. They went from 750 million ounces to 250 million ounces in 2 weeks, which means they sold 500 million ounces in 2 weeks. So, do the simple math. They got another week, and then what? Where are they going to? They're going to start hoovering up the world's silver supply. And we sit here with just like money printing into infinitum. I mean, the ink costs more on the paper than the paper's worth almost. And we're going to keep chug-a-lug printing like this and weaponizing and just selling more and destroying more. No, well, I'm sorry to say we're at the end. We're absolutely at the end. Nobody trusts us anymore. That's the whole thing. Once we started stealing everybody's assets, I think that was the final straw that broke the camel's back. They weaponized the dollar and confiscated sovereign nation assets, which is it hasn't been done since World War II. Like that, the stability of the world since the end of World War II in 1945 was broken by the United States last year or 2 years ago. Like that stability held. And the respect and the trust amongst nations, governments, consulates, whatever you like to call that theater that exists out there. Suddenly it's all in disarray. There's nothing left of the social contract for the individual. Now there's nothing left for the consular contract. I guess that's a thing, when consulates and dignitaries and diplomats do their thing, that has been broken too, that circle of trust inside even that sacred circle. Now, and the only way I can really look at it is it's a plan. It's planned to do this because we're on the reset of civilization in the cycles of the heavens. So would not all governments participate just as they did in COVID? I mean, I look at this reset here and I go, I think it's planned amongst every nation to do this. Now, is what we're seeing with the Five Eyes nations getting firewalled off from the rest of the BRICS nations, is this truly a thing? Or is this part of the plan to then reset the system and siphon all the wealth from the West right over into the new system? It makes me question a lot of possibilities. So I guess I'll leave it there, Ransom, because I could just rant for an hour or two, because I've taken a different perspective. I don't know, maybe I just drank the Kool-Aid this last week, but everything I see is different now. I can't explain it to you, but everything is different.
That Kool-Aid will get you every time. And that's what they're offering. It's digital Kool-Aid, man. No, I was thinking about when you're talking about the farmers and not getting the loans that they should be getting so that they could do the work that they need to do and produce the food that needs to be produced. I was literally playing BlackRock CEO talking about how, as I said earlier, I alluded to, that it's a good thing that the Western countries is what he's talking about. He doesn't say Western countries specifically, but that's who he's talking about, have declining populations, because their plans are to put, in his words, replace us, or substituting humans for machines is going to be far easier in those countries that have declining populations. So they kind of, they're putting it out there what they're going to do. You don't need a farmer with loans. You need to replace the farmer and cut the farmer out of the loop of the food production, because we all know that that's really the main power that all governments have over its people, is being able to control the food. If they control the food, they control you. They control the woman that wants to feed her kids, and where the woman goes, the kids go, and that's where the men go, even if that's into a concentrated camping zone for the reduction of said populations. But they are kind of put it in our face. And I also, when you were talking earlier about how it's just turning really weird, and they want to control identities, and then at the same time, basically make the population identity-less, where everybody is, connected in the same biometric nightmare of tracking, tracing, and pushing around and telling them what to think about. And I played this Army PSYOP group's weird recruitment video, and it's just it's showing a ghost as their emblem, and all these people making decisions that don't have faces and don't have hands, and it sounds a lot like something AI might do. And here's an article from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Spies like AI, the future of artificial intelligence for the U.S. intelligence community. And it goes on to talk about how they can use it to do many, many things. At the same time, we're trying to convince people to worship AI slowly by putting, like anecdotal characters, kind of like this AI priest who ended up saying, that after taking confession and saying babies could be baptized in Gatorade, which, it kind of makes sense. It's kind of like that movie Idiocracy. It's like, it's got electrolytes, man. It's got what we need, And then here's an article, how artificial intelligence could scrap humanity's ability to lie. And it kind of goes into the aspect of what I'm telling people. You're being bombarded with programming from all angles at this point. They're barely leaking it out to the public that they can do it, much less have they been doing it. How far are these programs? And like you said, I'm sure they're at least 50 or more years ahead of what they're showing the public. And the internet is being bombarded with these specific articles that are bragging about what is going on and how it's going on. Here's another one from The Hill. Humanity is one convincing deep fake away from a global catastrophe. In other words, they could just start war and then later say, oops, it was a deep fake. We messed up. Another instance in how you can use machines or AI and substitute humans in the loop to cause a problem. Here's another one, how artificial intelligence AI is used in biometrics. And they go over a lot of the stuff I've been talking about. You have the AI face recognition, you have AI fingerprint recognition, you have AI iris recognition, you have AI in behavior recognition, keystroke dynamics, gait recognition, speech recognition. So what I'm telling you is on top of all of the recognition and the quadrupling of verification of your location, your presence, and your mood, they have what I mean is, yeah, that's part of it. Emotion detection. It's going on and it's happening now, and they're using these softwares and algorithms through the devices that they've trained you to use. That's all those phone zombies out there that, and I hate to say it, there's people, a lot of our audience is probably listening or looking at the video on their phone, and I'm not really talking to you specifically, but you have to be aware that it is happening to you as well. You can't get into these matrix interface without coming across it. So there it is: face, fingerprint, iris, behavior, all of these things. And you got to think about this. What if you become an enemy of the state because one of said moods or thoughts happen to be recognized by one of their algorithms and programs that they're using? Well, you might just have a late night knock at the door by the secret police, who might just take you away there because you had the wrong thought. And not only that, what if we get a little more advanced, and because of officer safety and to protect the government, they just send in a bot that gets to decide what to do with you when it finds you. And, it can also do these things. So now you've quadruply identified yourself, your location. I hate to say it to all those people out in the third world countries that are using old networks and other things. Guess what? You're quadruply identified, and at any time, something off of a kill bot can fly out of the sky and land on you, and they don't care about collateral damage. Matter of fact, in the United States, the Supreme Court has ruled that, law enforcement can kill the kidnapping victims or the hostages if it means getting the criminal. Let's move on, though. Scientists can read your mind. AI turns people's thoughts into images. So how long is it till your home interface of your PC, your laptop, your tablet, your phone, etc., is now not only just spying on you, but it's also reporting on you? Is that happening already? I think it is. And that's kind of goes back to what's going on there in Europe. This huge Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all behind Japan's framework for global AI and 6G regulations adopted by the EU. So everybody in the Trilateral Commission and its regions are all in cahoots. They're all doing a singular objective right now. Here's another one, the propaganda that you might be getting. They don't even want to tell you. Here's another instance in where humans are replaced by machines or algorithms. Ukraine unveils AI foreign minister spokesperson to provide updates on war with Russia. So, now we got army people that don't have hands and heads, and we have AIs telling us how the war's going, despite your own lying eyes or, ears. It soon will be to the point where, remember, now I'm putting out this case for all the technologies that they already have and have admitted to, and the idea that you could combine these with a little bit better, everything where it increases over time, where programs get better, more efficient, and higher tech as they go along. So you combine all these, and now it can not only know what's going on in your head. I put to you, if there's a connection that allows them to take what's out of your head, then you can reverse that technology and put things into your head, which goes back to this idea of extraterrestrials. It doesn't even have to be extraterrestrials. It could be just a super AI, advanced algorithm, learning machine, digital citizen, if you want to put it that way, in the new reset world of the world that a lot of people are still, in the occult and can't see it, even though it's right in front of your face as we speak. So with that said, is that an alien entity that can now read our thoughts, can take our thoughts? And what is the end result in that? Is that not a merger of technology and biological life? Which makes you wonder, is that just something that's going to happen no matter what? On any intellectual species out there in the cosmos will get to a certain point where they have to make this decision. Are they going to separate themselves from technology or completely merge with it and become like, I don't know, ant colonies? You can picture, and I've joked about this before. It seems like they're terraforming the earth and changing humans into those little gray aliens that they tell us visit us in the night. Big-eyed, big-brained little thing that just does its task and goes on like an autonomous creature, but it's alive, but it's kind of a robot, but no soul, basically. Now, are we to end up in that place? If we let them control the food, that's exactly in the position we'll have to be in.
Well, trust the experts. Nobody would ever. They're all experts when they tell you that you're wrong or talking about the wrong thing. I mean, this food thing. Hey, we can just print it in the lab. It's just as nutritious, dude. Hey, you're talking about controlling small farms now. You can't even have one cow in Oregon. Wait, we said that was going to, but the experts, the fact checkers said that wasn't going to happen. That was a conspiracy theory that they were going to start to control small farms, small ranchers, even those with just a half-acre garden would be included in the new laws in Oregon. But we were conspiracy theorists talking about that. Control of food. Here's another thing. I have been watching a few videos because my channel has been struggling here on YouTube for the last year or so. But I had other, sources of income. So I kept wondering, why was it booming for a minute and then suddenly it just went stagnant completely? Hadn't gained any subscribers in over a year, even though I'm on more popular programs, etc. Oh, I got to let my dog out of the room. Hold on. Here you go. Making me break. Go. Yeah. So then I started to look at these people that were all in the farming industry and homesteaders and, weekend market people all saying, I'm going to quit YouTube. I'm thinking about quitting YouTube. So I watched a fair few of them and they're all saying the same thing, that some algorithm is coming in and pushing their reach incredibly low. So it seems like there's organized bots, if you will. You could call it AI generated bot farms. It'll come in and it'll click on the video and it'll watch for under 30 seconds and it'll turn it off. And then the retention rate's really, really low on the videos. And then YouTube and the algorithm doesn't suggest it any longer. So even I was watching this one guy who's got 900,000 subscribers, but he can only get 10,000 views on a video. Because there's a bot farm or a bot army of AI generated bots that will come in and attack these channels and drive down the metrics super, super low on their retention so they actually fade into oblivion. Now, here's the thing. They're all happening to these self-sufficiency channels. During the COVID, these things just took off like spring mushrooms, and everybody was like, wow, they'd have 10,000 subscribers. And then during COVID, after a couple of years, they're up 500,000 subscribers and they're making good money. And then suddenly it seems as if the information is being turned off. It's becoming so painful for these people to try to make a living on YouTube anymore and do anything social media that they need to go back to spending all of their time growing the food and get off the channel to be able to share the information with us. And that's the craziest thing is, these information sharing channels are the ones that are being targeted now. And it's not the one about how to fix your car or how to fix a helicopter. It's the ones that are the simplest of how to grow food. And if you do remember 2 years ago, just as COVID was kicking in, the catch and clean channels had the same exact thing happen to them where they were no longer allowed to show, for example, catching an alligator and then dispatching it and then skinning it and then barbecuing it and doing whatever. Even fish, you were not allowed to show the actual end of the fish's life on YouTube, or that would strike your channel. So with all these hunting channels, and they call it catch, cook, and clean, those were the very first ones of that primal skill of being able to go hunt and then prepare your food. I watch a lot of these things, rabbits. Rabbit season, Squirrel season. I mean, I hadn't really brushed up on my squirrel cleaning skills because I found a couple recipes thanks to a buddy of mine over at Appalachian Observatory. Had an old cookbook from the 1800s, how to prepare squirrel. Water, salt, and squirrel. That's all you needed. Apparently, it was a pretty easy recipe, so I thought, all right, we'll go squirrel hunting. It was the right season. But even the catch, cook, and clean. So when I was looking, all right, we got to be able to clean these things proper. And I watched a bunch of videos. And I go, okay, it looks pretty simple. And brushed up on that since I was a kid. Hadn't been hunting squirrels since I was way young. But man, 8 years old, 10 years old with my grandpa way back in the day. I mean, those are the things you kind of forget. You just still sort of remember, but it would be getting fresh again. So to really, and then catch some recipes of people doing it modern style. But these whole thing got cut off. The entire catch, cook, and clean genre got cleaned out, literally, no pun intended. Because they don't want you to know how to hunt and clean your animals. And now here they're trying to cut off all the self-sufficiency in gardening channels. So these people can't share their knowledge. So you'd be able to grow food or create compost or, do some natural, pest control without having to use the chemical. Because you said it, man. You said it. You hit it on the head, Ransom. It's like you need to be in the system. If you're not in that petrochemical, toxic chemical system, they don't want you there. So those people who can grow their own food don't have to ingest the chemicals from the, petrochemical industry on the foods. If you don't know how to make your own anything, then you're going to be relying on buying everything from the store still. Now, I'm guilty of that too, to a degree. But I mean, to wipe this knowledge out from the general YouTube space, and this is the nefarious thing that I didn't like. They gave those people a living and a way to make an enormous amount of money when they hadn't before, spreading knowledge about gardening, and they got everybody hooked on that money, thinking that next month's revenue is going to stay the same, and suddenly they're down 90% on the views. Well, their revenue's down 90% also. So unless they had advertisers in there, which most I know gardening channels hated to put any ads in their videos, unless they were on a contract to do that, they just lost 90% of the revenue. When they would spend 8 hours a day filming everything when they were going to the garden versus spending that time actually growing 8 hours extra of food to go spend on the weekend market to stay there for 8 extra hours to try to make the extra $20 at the end of the day. Like the whole mechanics of it switched. They got everybody out of even getting into that weekend market phase of those people who used to do that to get them relying on doing the grow videos. So you can look, there's a shift there, great shift. And I look at this and I'm getting, our world's being shut down. The transfer of information is absolutely being constricted heavily at the moment. Now, you're not even allowed to talk about Bible verses anymore, apparently, according to today's news. There's some verses in the Bible that I'm not able to read any longer, or else I'll go to jail. The same in Canada. You can't quote scripture in Canada, or else you'll go to jail. All these people sitting around here that are, heavily on the strong Christian side are the ones that are saying in the end days, you're going to watch the Antichrist pull up and be like, forbid you from speaking Bible verses or reading the Bible out loud. And then here they are cheering the passages of laws that restrict you from reading Bible scripture out loud. It's unbelievable. It's like the same people are doing the same thing. They're cheering the blocking of the sun. Now you got people cheering the revocation of the First Amendment. There are people cheering that we're not allowed to speak about things anymore. I don't care what side of the fence you're on. Free speech is that is the most innate right. And you come back to talking about AI and thing generating even deep in your thoughts, even able to think something. Now this gets kind of into the weird woo-woo side of things here, where you're not, the things we're not allowed to talk about anymore, from hunting to gathering your own food. The wild foraging channels are probably going to be the next thing that go. Because how dare you let somebody go out and understand free vegetables in different seasons to go out, and the natural wild vegetables are always way more loaded with incredible superfood, micronutrients and things. I mean, you might have a garden and grow your own veg. That's cool. Nutrients, vitamins, yes. Minerals, yes. Trace minerals, awesome. But when you get wild forage stuff growing straight in the forest or out in the fields that are chemical free, like on your own property or whatnot at the edge of the forest in the field, Whew, you're talking about some succulentness there right now. That is something that would, I can't really say anything about medical, but there's many benefits for your body to be more awake and retain strength. Our world is absolutely being cut off and choked off. And if you were the invader as a non-hominid species, and you were invading this planet, and the hominids were in control, you would have to absolutely stop. First, you'd have to dumb them down for several generations. And secondly, you would have to cut off the food source and the water source and the knowledge source so nobody could find food or water. So is this invasion, if you're looking at things that are millions of years ahead of us, it's a slow trickle invasion over 20 or 30 years, something that's doable as a siege on a planet, on a planetary level for all races of the same species on the planet? Because you look back in wars, how they wouldn't really race to war. They would siege the castle first. Didn't matter if it took a year to break the people, but eventually they, fell. Is this the same thing, but we're just witnessing a 20, 30-year siege of the planet? And this is finally the final twisting of the mechanisms of the faucet being completely turned off. If they were to do away with the electricity, most of humanity would perish, for sure. So, you got to look at this, how the world was built up in the last 100 years, reliance on certain systems that keep our species alive. And right now, those same systems are being dismantled in unison across these same years, across all leaders of all nations, all partaking in the same dismantling at the exact same seconds in unison. So you tell me if we're being invaded at the moment on a global scale. I don't know if communism is the way to look at it, and it's part of it, but I think there's something deeper and interdimensional or off planet in play right now. So much it's in your face, and we're foretold of these same events. And I know you're going to say something, dovetail it, Ransom, dovetail it.
I was just thinking, what kind of government would you call an ant colony? Is that like a communal communist nation there? An invasion. Think about that as something real for something that has a lifespan maybe a little longer than humans. So can you even put an age lifespan on an AI? Once an AI is created, how long would it potentially live if it had, the framework to exist and continue to get upgraded over time? So there's one aspect. Or even, if you want to go extraterrestrial, who says their lifespan is anything like ours? And that might explain why we get these dates given to us about how the world needs to change. Not unlike what you're talking about. If you remember when we went into the Gulf, Bush had to make sure that he got in there on the month of March, or, he had to get in there at a certain date. And what else was going on? See, it's hard for me not to look at the world and then not see a continual unlocking of a puzzle. So, we saw a lot of digging around the Middle East, and then there was war. I don't know if that's connected, but I really think it was. It seemed like the unlocking of additional knowledge, which perpetuated whatever plan is going on. And I put to you that there's simultaneous plans going on so that no one could really react to one or two or three even plans going on, but that there's so many in the clockwork. You got the Judeo-Christian ideas about how Armageddon will unfold. You can self-prophesize or fulfill that self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're the elite, you have the fears of a global catastrophe, which might be on a scale that they know about. Because think about it, all the knowledge, you can go back 2,000 years. It's all been steadily and perpetually obscured, at least the ancient knowledge of whatever happened before the last great mass catastrophe on Earth, which I would say it was at the end of the Hunger Dryas there. And, whatever's happening now seems to be directly related to those stories that you get in the first civilization that really came about and started writing about stuff afterwards. So all the same things, chimeras, entities, tablets. I mean, you could go on and on. I know those are up for debate on how you translate certain things, but even if you translated them the way that mainstream archaeology wants you to, you could see that those stories coalesce with what's going on now technologically. And I would say that whether it's man-made or extraterrestrial or just some kind of singularity that was going to happen eventually, we are indeed being invaded by a new system, and it coalesces and is concurrently happening, or how do you say that? Yeah, concurrently happening with the New World Order plans of depopulation. It's just fitting right together.
Well, it's fitting right together, right on the same time scale as this natural reset occurs electromagnetically. I mean, you're looking at the changes that are here now. Even just all these things that are happening naturally because of the change of the electromagnetic flow on a Berkey current through our solar system would reset the civilization to the point that it would not be recognizable in a few more years anyway. So take advantage of that and then try to maintain control as the shift occurs. Everything's going to be vibrating faster as we continue through this. So old systems won't hold, or people won't believe them anymore. Have you noticed that people have come to a non-believability of the old world at the moment? Like even things that were considered rock solid as the bedrock of belief even 25 years ago, people question it now. That's the changing frequency. But then we need a new money system. We need a new governmental system. We need a new track and trace system. We need to know what your thoughts are. We need to know where your location is. We need to know what food you eat. Why is this so important suddenly? Like all these things that need to be known in the human domain in real time with smart dust and graphene oxide smart dust and all these new patents coming out that have to do with IOTA and different Bill Gates tracking technologies and dispersal of social credits or some sort of digital currency based on your actions, or how many push-ups you do, or how loyal you are to go out to the community, I guess, exercise sessions. Why now? Why so much change instantly right now, forced to the point of being sloppy? Well, the time clock has run out, basically. Now they can be as sloppy as they want because we're truly at I'm not going to even say the end, the beginning of the massive noticeable change where they can't control society anymore after that. I think this is the last year that we would understand a stable, controlled society, because as we push forward, the electromagnetic changes definitely are already starting to affect a lot of humanity in terms of the way their thoughts are processed. So this is what I was thinking, Ransom. I know we can bring it into the next hour, but with AI controlling thought and being able to read thought, imagine with the change in the electromagnetic field, is it trying to keep the human back on course again of not losing its mind so it still has a worker force after this change? Because if we're talking about this thing being millions of years old, it's been through thousands of these cycle resets. And it already knows something about the human realm in that. So if you knew the electromagnetic hemispheres of a human brain would flip and they would actually go insane, like literally insane, to the point of non-functionality, laying on the floor peeing yourself because your body won't be able to function. You won't even have that much cognitive awareness in your brain on even how your body functions. It'll misfunction, a malfunction. Like the body will malfunction in a zero magnetic field like this as we come through some sectors of solar changes. Like as an entity that would be here much longer and understand that physiological effect, would it not try to also prevent that effect so it could keep its workforce or its slave labor force alive through the change so it was still there? And then at the end of the changes of the shift of ages, everything will be legend by that point anyway. All the books will be burnt. It would not surprise me if they sent out scouting parties to go through people's homes and find books and just burn them so there's nothing left after this. That's the kind of reset I'm talking about. Very few manuscripts. You tell me, you go find me something from 2,000 years ago, really. That's not a piece of rock. And there's very little intact. We went to a lot of museums, but it's just junk. Everything is just shattered. And you go find me a painting or some manuscript, like I say, you know, find me something written in scrolls. Almost all of it's gone, and it's been rewritten, and this is the way we said it was written originally, so believe us, we're the experts. History is written by the victors, you know? So it's committed this time. What will we be told about this time in 100 years from now, 50 years from now, 30 years from now? The great cataclysms of World War II and World War I, that storyline in history that they got from the late 1800s to the middle 1800s, was it truly that, or were they also sold a lie?
Just under 1,500 years ago, something terrifying happened to the world's climate, something nobody could understand. The sun began to go dark. Rain, the color of blood, poured from the skies. Clouds of fine dust enveloped the earth. Winter gripped the land for 2 years. Then came drought, famine, plague, and death. Whole cities were wiped out. Civilizations crumbled, and nobody knew what had happened. It was a catastrophe that affected millions and millions of people all around the world. But what was it? A catastrophic climatic event buried in the heart of the Dark Ages. This mid-6th century catastrophe was the most important date in the history of the past 2,000 years. This event created the world we live in today, something far removed from the minds of everyday peoples of our modern times. Unbeknownst to most, the catastrophe could at any time happen again. The volcanic winter was caused by at least 3 simultaneous eruptions of uncertain origin, with several possible locations proposed in various continents. There is even evidence of an extraterrestrial factor. A possible origin for this object could be the Taurid meteor stream. This stream is the result of the fragmentation of a much larger comet some 20,000 years ago. The Earth passes through the Taurid stream in November and June each year, resulting in regular meteor showers normally consisting of microscopic dust particles. A fragmentation of the stream is thought to have occurred around 500. It is possible that a fragment could then have collided with the Earth as it passed through the beta portion of the stream early in 536, causing the atmospheric dust veil event. The relevance is crop failures for several years in a row. While the dust veil was present, it may have caused widespread starvation, leading to an increased susceptibility to disease among the remaining population. Small comets had previously been thought to be less hazardous than small asteroids, but estimates show that a small comet fragment can have a global effect. In early AD 536, or possibly even late 535, an eruption or eruptions ejected massive amounts of sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere. The solar radiation reaching the Earth's surface reduced dramatically, and this rapidly cooled the atmosphere. Despite what the global warming nuts say, the sun seems to be the main driver of temperature and climate. The main historical aspect of the period around 536 may also be the most significant, especially to those descendants of the survivors. Who would be us today? This period coincides with a mass population decrease in Europe, in the Americas, the Middle East, and in Asia. In Europe, this is commonly known as the Justinian period, named after the Justinian plague, and is believed to be the first appearance of the Black Death in Europe. Meanwhile, in the Mayan Empire, things were looking bad. Researchers have realized that there is a 100-year gap in the civilization's productivity starting in 540, suggesting a dark age. The civilization experienced mass crop failure, which led to disease, starvation, and likely internal strife. People evacuated cities in and around present-day El Salvador. Cities that were left behind experienced a dark age, as evidenced by a gap in written records and a sudden decrease in construction in Maya city centers during the 6th century. In China, 536 was no better. Frost and snow in July and August that killed the seedling crop, causing a major famine the following autumn. Weather was so severe that 70 to 80% of the people starved to death. Procopius. The sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during this whole year, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse. The sun was dark, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours, and still this light was only a feeble shadow. Michael the Syrian. If such an event happened today, and crops failed over a significant part of the globe for several consecutive years, then once again a large percentage of the world's population would face starvation. Thankfully, unlike the peoples of the worst year to be alive, we don't have to worry about not having food to last. We have my Patriot supply. And right now, you can save $200 on a 3-month food kit with Adapt 2030. Adapt and stay prepared.
Hello. Is there anybody out there?
Yes, sir.
All right, I lost my internet here as we were on the break. Isn't that interesting? So welcome back to the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. Ransom Godwin taking over the helm as the internet problems sweep through Tennessee. We're expecting storms tonight. I don't know. We don't have storms yet. I don't know why the internet has gone out. But I thought we were live, so I was yapping away for a minute there. Let me start off to preface the hour here. As Ransom was talking about with the reset, with the economy and this controlled everything moving, you know, we talked about the last hour. Well, here's the newest thing that I see coming up and I've been hearing more and more about. You know, BlackRock and Vanguard, which Ransom was mentioning there, we're on this tangent to buy up all these single family homes around the United States. They own 40% of all single family homes. Now, people started to catch on and then actually directly point the finger. So they had to start unloading a lot of these homes because, you know, there was even senators and congressmen, whatever, Congress people, whatever you want to, Congress women. Do I have to be correct? I'm just going to call them Congress critters. Were starting to point fingers also and go, BlackRock, you know, my constituents are all yapping because they can't afford a house. Like, you guys got to do what you got to sell some stuff and, you know, take the pressure off. Your plan to you will own nothing and be happy, it just isn't, it's too fast. So anyway, they're starting to dump an enormous amount of homes back on the market again. So watch this. There's going to be a huge decrease in prices coming up because BlackRock and Vanguard are going to sell apparently 50% of their holdings. Now, I don't have the exact number, but if you're talking about 40% of all American homes are owned by these venture capital companies, and they're going to drop 20% of those and put them back on the market at the same time. So 20% of all American homes are going to come back on listings here in the next, between now and the next 6 months. There's going to be a tidal wave of homes for sale, like an incredible tidal wave, right at the time all these crazy interest rates. But here's the thing. The build to rent phenomenon is taking over that area where BlackRock and Vanguard are now pushing into these home developer companies where they're building entire neighborhoods, not for anybody to even live in from day one as an owner. From day one, every single unit in these, you know, 50, 100, 200 home neighborhoods are only to rent. There will never be a buyer in there. They're only to rent. So they're building 200 homes in a neighborhood of only build to rent homes. And get this, some of the prices around Atlanta, Georgia, $3,000 a month to rent a home. That's ridiculous. So this whole thing, you know, the finger was rightly pointed. Now they got to dump the family homes, so because more people are really pointing the finger, going, this is why it costs so much. You all are in collusion buying all the homes. So now they need to they have to divest out, or else they're going to get some serious fines. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny. So tidal wave, a glut of, but nobody can afford that now because too expensive with the insurance going up. By the way, I got dinged for a 30% increase in my insurance premiums, both car and auto, fire, home, liability insurance, 30%. Ding. And I'll talk to my agent, and then she's like, well, maybe next year also, we think we priced in most of the game. I was like, well, how much is price? Okay, I understand. You priced it in. What about next year? And she's like, well, generally they price in everything this one time of the year, and they might slightly increase your rates again next year or the year after next too. And I'm like, well, what's a slight increase? Oh, 5 to 7, maybe 10%. I'm like, you're going to increase 10% a year, 10% a year, 10% a year. Really? Yeah. Sorry. Try to get you the best rates. Anyway, Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us jaw about these topics here, as they'd say down in the South. We're jawing tonight. Thank you for letting us speak freely, because you can see the entire internet's being closed, constricted, a boa constrictor of AI around everybody's thoughts. And not only is AI controlling who can be assassinated or not, but now they're controlling what you can say, what you can think, what you even thought you can have. AI is now in control of the internet completely to turn off anything that can help another human being survive, as our planet is under siege. Thank you for letting us talk about it. If you think free speech is important, Revolution Radio, consider a donation. Ransom, I so meaningfully cut you off, dude. Welcome back.
No, that's cool. I was about to ask if someone was out there too. You know, you threw me on a whole thought process before we left when you were talking about the magnetic hijacking of, you know, our thought processes and how that fits into what I was talking about AI being able to, and machinery, robot AI, they go together hand in hand, the mind and the body. For those that might be confused about me linking them together constantly, the robotics are the body for the AI. Well, that is until they have our bodies, but that's a different story. I was thinking about that, you know, in relation to the last, you know, catastrophe that befell worldwide mankind. And I pointed that out before, the end of the Hunger Dryas. What do you have before that? You have these megalithic buildings, right? And they're all over the place. No writing, which insinuates they have some other means of, you know, telling each other how to build things or conveying these big ideas. And the thought of us going into a period where there is no magnetic, you know, kind of overwhelming force on us, is it reasonable to think that just possibly a human being next to another human being in that circumstance may be able to learn to translate the electromagnetic field that's coming off the other person if the situation was right? So in other words, if two people were sitting and there's not an overwhelming magnetic field kind of oppressing them, and there's also no, you know, inputting from artificial means, which they're planning on doing, if there was none of that, it might become possible for literally a human being to be next to another human being and completely empathize, and not only that, learn to start translating thoughts and ideas the exact same way that those machines are doing, that they're now, you know, deploying in our reality. And I know this is off that topic, but while you digest that, you know, I really think though, what was it, BlackRock? And if they're planning on selling all that, be on the lookout for several companies to get in between that to buy them all up. You know, if they're going to get in trouble for having so many or have problems for that, wouldn't it be nice if they could just make a nice profit and sell it to 3 or 4 other companies that are going to keep those properties as commercial real estate to rent out, or, you know, the houses and the family homes that they have to rent out also, just like you were talking about. They're not really intending to build new houses for people to have the American dream and own their property and have property rights. It's much more beneficial to the collapsing system if you can only rent. If you can only rent, then you can be violated for some kind of, you know, rule or infraction with the rental agreement. And then they can start dehousing people based on the same idea that they've been debanking people, or I guess you could call it dehumanizing them in the most way, where you get rid of their ID and they can't, you know, interact with the beast system anymore, not even to rent a house, because they violated some kinds of terms that reflect from their social credit score, and now they've been depersoned, they're dehomed and debanked. That is a nightmare that seems to be something that is in the cards when you take all of these in account. Now, I know I kind of skipped topics, but they're really kind of related. In order to, overcome the public and completely control them, you got to control everything about them, and you can't have them owning property, producing their own food, and having time to think and have ideas, much like we've had in other, eras of history where, when left alone, it seems the descendants of Cro-Magnon use our smaller brains to figure things out quite well. And if left alone long enough, invent things. And I think that's what they're scared of, because now that they're deploying all of these new technologies, they're trying to compete for the position of power in the world that is generally held by Homo sapiens. They don't like the middle class. They don't like people with ideas. They don't like people with sway, power, or groups. And that's why they're trying to end the nation state. And if you can bring in this idea of a nationless, faceless population, well, of course, you would have to hand over the control of said population to an AI. And that way it won't be bigoted, or, it'll be completely woke, and it'll base its, fundamental evaluation of humans based on that, which is, as we know, is part of a Marxist cultural revolution. And that's where it ties together the technocratic system and the Marxist revolution, holding hands, basically to the end of civilization as we know it, and replacing it with a society that owns nothing and thinks they're happy, because they might be happy whenever the chip in their head, the biological chip that was assembled inside of their body, let's say, and so a lot of people know kind of what I'm linking that to, tells them that they feel better. Well, they're going to feel better because the dopamine and the endorphins and steroids or whatever are going to flow in their body in the way that the algorithm decides it will. So at some point, you won't even have, except for some, rare, mathematically, let's say, I don't know how you would put this. I guess they're irrelevant outliers that, can't fit into the system or be reprogrammed. So they'll have those and they'll get rid of them. But the vast majority of people will be easily controlled by this, and they won't even know that their emotions and their thoughts are being manipulated with such a large and complicated system that's now and we see that. All you have to do is log on to the internet, get on your phone. If you really start looking for it, you will see it, and you'll see it in the movies. You will see it in the news outlets. You'll see it in the TV shows, talk shows. You'll see it in all of the newspaper outlets, as far as internet news sites. They all have this Marxist agenda pushing forward. Even the right-leaning supposed alternate to these ideas, when it comes down to it, in the government, they always vote the same way. They always vote together. That's why we've given away, excuse me, billions and billions and billions of dollars to protect other people's sovereign property, but not our own, because here they want to end that idea. And how are they going to do that? Well, the bottom line of that is they have to cripple our ability to produce our own energy. And that means no private property and no growing your own foods. You'll have to stick to the mandated rules and regulations of whatever place you've occupied that you now have to pay rent, which is basically a slave idea. And we've always had a portion of the population voluntarily living in that, because they didn't want to save, or they didn't want to be, in uncomfortable positions for as long as it took to actually own property and be there. And, I'm guilty of that too. In my young years, I wanted to have a good time. So if someone would have told me in kindergarten that, you don't have to worry about anything else in the world, just figure out how to grow your own food, cook your own food, store your own food. And to do that, the very first thing you have to do is own some land, even if it's a small piece of land, just a place to put your things that belongs to you legally. Now, I don't know how long that idea will last. Say you get a 95%, corporate and government ownership of all property, along with the Marxist agenda. they might just decide that you're not the right person to own property in the first place. And that goes back to what I was talking about. But yeah, I think they're trying to block out whatever singularity was going to happen with the human species, to loop back around to the original thought there of the magnetic field possibly being less, and them having to act fast to counteract whatever result that might be in the human condition. What do you think? Back to you, Bob, with the weather.
Yeah, it's something this way coming. I mean, then you look at the setup of all the 5G, and you look at all the computers and all the Wi-Fi signal around us. It's almost as if this frequency field was built in advance. We might consider it advances in technology. But again, if you're going to invade a planet and you're so technologically advanced that you're doing it in a way that the planet doesn't know it's being invaded, and you knew this singularity was going to come through, and the only thing between you and this singularity, and once this sweeps through, you got another 12,000 years, another 26,000 years until the next singularity pops through. So you get 12 more years of rulership on this planet if you can stop the upgrade. That's the whole thing. But then if you have the technology and you start to introduce it 100 years before, then what? Then we're saturated in this soup that also interferes with that. You're talking about magnetic hijacking, I think the way you termed it. There would also be frequency hijacking. I mean, myself today, I walked around barefoot twice in my front field. It felt good. I always try to walk around barefoot because the hawks are all around the place right now because we got a bunch of new geese, little goslings everywhere, and we got a few new ducks. We got some baby chicks all over. We got like 15 baby chicks. Because we're going to try to bring up the egg production a little higher now because, whatever you're going to buy, you're going to lose probably 30%. Either they're going to get sick and die or they're going to take them by a predator. So if you start with 15, you probably got like 9 or 10 by the time they get to egg laying size. Because I was up to the farm co-op. I needed to get some pond liner. And I picked up one of the newspapers. It's like a little newspaper for farming community. It's only like 10 pages maximum, one of those free things they give out every couple weeks. But they had some land listings here, and I want to read one for you. 37 acres, and there's an old barn that's poor condition but could be fixed. It's in hilly country, and when I say remote, I am talking that, damn, I look at this and go, that's way too remote for me. If you were to get bit by a rattlesnake or something, you'd have a very difficult time driving down mountain. Especially if they bit your foot or your hand or something, or if you're in real pain, if you hit yourself with a chainsaw, had some serious bleeding wounds. I don't know if you'd be able to get out of there. It's too far back. And you're going down a logging road for access to this place. 37 acres in the middle of absolute nowhere. And they still want $500,000 for 37 acres of 100% forest, not even a single square inch of, pasture land. This is hilly, prime forest down a logging road. Well, they call it a service road, forest service boundary road. And $500,000 for 37 acres where you plop in there, you got start from zero scratch. There's not even a driveway in there. And this is the kind of land prices they're asking for now. That's ridiculous. I saw that when I was waiting to pay, and then I had a quick chat. I was like, well, you ever thought $500,000 for 37 acres of forest up a hillside? And people just, oh man, it's just the way it is. Things are going up, But who is going to own some of the property at these prices? Because I don't know if anybody chalked the FMOC minutes yesterday, which the Federal Reserve's news conference on if they were going to raise or if they were going to lower rates yesterday. So if you saw your crypto go down, if you saw the stocks go down, VIX was up, if you saw this craziness of prices up and down this way, that way, and every way, because the Federal Reserve, they were saying if we raise these rates up to 5% or whatever, we're going to check inflation and we're going to lower rates. Well, they did not lower or raise the rates, which for me and you is a very bad sign. That even with them trying to manipulate all the numbers to still get inflation at 2% in check, that even with all the measures that have devalued our lives have done nothing to control anything. And I don't know why they have the absurdity to believe that they need to be in control and tell us that we need to lose 2% of our purchasing power every year so they can hit some magical number that means nothing. So what they're trying to tell you in a long way with all this gobbledygook financial talk is they did not lower the rates like yesterday, which means there is a serious financial problem going on, where they have lost control of the economy pretty much, where they are stuck. I mean, literally stuck between a rock and a hard place, or full-on global depression would be a better term. The minute they start cutting rates, they're going to have to print it. If they raise rates further, they're just going to kill more business. We're stuck into this feedback death loop spiral of every economy's fiat currency at the end of the empire. We are we're right at that crux moment right now, where throughout the last 900 years of fiat currencies, whatever the leading fiat of the day was, and I love Ray Dalio's take on this. He did a really good series of videos talking about the reserve currency of the world, going back to the Portuguese and the Dutch and the English and the Spanish and the British pound and the American dollar. They follow a certain curve. And we are at that inflection point right now where the trust of the issuing nation has been lost. And once you lose that trust amongst all the other nations around the planet, you never regain it. That is the end of the currency at that point. And we're coming also to the point where every currency in the past has done the same thing. Since less people wanted it, they tried to entice them to want it by using gold, trading gold, leverage gold, silver products at the time. You know, you're going back further in time when gold and silver is used as money. Dual monetary metals system. Right now we're on a gold system, not really so much silver. But we've flipped the switch now. We're stuck in the middle. There's nowhere for America to go any longer except two choices. They raise rates, which will absolutely destroy the economy, because going higher to get more people to want to buy our treasury bonds is going to absolutely crush the American business world. Like, again, it comes down to farm credit. Okay, for me and you, 5% or 5.5%, yeah, on some things you buy. I mean, does it really? Because how much would you really borrow? A couple $100,000, maybe? $500,000, maybe? Okay, that might make it a little more painful if you're borrowing $500,000 compared to like 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000. These farmers are going off on like 10 million. Businesses are getting up into 100 millions. So that extra half of a point really does make a huge, gigantic difference when you're starting to borrow billions of dollars. Half a billion, hundreds of millions, tens of millions. And if they cut the rates, then we're not even going to be able to pay our interest payments to people, and we're just going to have to print more money, which takes us into hyperinflation. And a Great Depression, it would be a stagflation. There's like almost zero economic growth. At the same time, everything's hyperinflating away. They call it stagflation. Like there's zero economic growth, like everything's stagnant. That's why they call it the stag. Stagnant growth is stagnant nothing. Everything's at 0% growing or declining. And then you got runaway inflation. We are absolutely, if you can't grow your own food, I'm sorry, you're going to have a very difficult time moving through this. Because this thing with the Federal Reserve just yesterday spooked the entire planet. If you don't follow financial news, the Cliff Notes is the rest of the world realized that we're not the reserve currency of the world anymore after yesterday. It was conjectured it could continue, but writing's now on the wall where our money is no longer wanted, or it's not really so much wanted, trusted by the rest of the world. And without that trust, nobody will ever use our money as a reserve currency again. And now we're looking, and I have some new numbers for you. $1.7 trillion per year is what we're going to be paying on the interest for what we owe to people that have bought our treasury bonds as soon as April or February of 2025. That's not even a year from now. And we're going to be paying almost $2 trillion a year just for the interest payments. Then we need to print money to operate the government. And they need to sell more of these treasury bonds. So it has to be at a higher price or else nobody's going to want it. So it would not surprise me if they do some. Now, watch this is a little bit of woo-woo coming up here on the financial thing. Overlaying with the food prices and overlaying with the food shortages. They're going to dovetail it together, I do believe. After watching a fair few economists after explaining the Federal Reserve minutes, they're going to take it, if they could, magically to 10%, just like flip of a switch, 10%. An enormous amount of people around the world will want to buy our bonds at that point. And that'll give money for, back to the Federal Reserve here and the federal government, for us to print more, to keep the government functional. But at that percentage rate, almost all American businesses will close. There'll be very little economic activity. That'll be a Great Depression type of thing. But the government will survive, and they will continue to print to infinitum. And if they raise those rates up, anything at 10% or above, the amount of interest payments that we will accrue will be running up about $1 trillion less than every 6 months. So by the end of 2025, we will be up around $3 trillion for interest payments alone, which gets us in that feedback loop. Then we need to sell $3 trillion of future payments on the treasury bills to some schmuck out there, schmuck country, just to pay the interest to the people who, the Ponzi scheme, who bought the treasury bills before. And this is the death loop spiral economy that we are in at the moment here. So bless yourself. Just feel how lucky you are today to breathe air and have abundance around you, because as we look forward into this world, and they're going to use the food shortages as the reason to raise the interest rates, or is it going to be vice versa? They're going to have to explain away why your food is running to the moon and you cannot afford to eat. I was saying in the video today, we're going to have to revamp our values here. We're absolutely going to have to reassess the values of what is right and wrong as we move through these changes. Because you might go, hey, stealing's bad. Well, stealing to feed your family is stealing to feed yourself. You got a chance to heat, freeze to death in your house, or steal food. You know, these are the choices that are going to be left for a lot of people moving into the winter. Have you grown? Have you stored? Have you packaged? Have you stocked? Have you dehydrated? Have you canned? Have you gardened? Have you done anything? Because you're going to be essential. I did that story last week on Target, locking up everything in the store. You have to order, and like when you go into, apparently this is rolling out as we speak. Target is putting everything behind walls, glass, plexiglass, where they're not even going to have somebody where you can press the button like, hey, I want to get the shaving cream. Can you unlock it? It's going to be far beyond that. You're going to go into the front, and you're going to have to use a computer screen, and you're going to order, and they will bring you everything out. You have to pay in advance before they even bring it out to you. This is the direction it's going. And then I'd heard these stories, Ransom, and I'd seen these stories. Now Ransom, I'm asking you a question here because I want to see if you heard these same stories, because I can validate something I've actually seen people talk about now. It's probably been like 6 months to maybe 6 months to 4 months ago. I was seeing people saying, look at all these new pickup spots that they're putting, delivery spots that they're putting into all these huge parking lots at Costco and Walmart and Sam's Club and all these places, Target stores, where they were putting that pickup like they did in COVID. Well, my little small town where I live has 1,000 people out here. And then if you drive a little bit further, there's like 4,000 people in the next town. And there's this little tiny Walmart that serves everybody. If you need to get that kind of stuff, you can drive 45 minutes and get to, some larger shopping stuff like a Home Depot and thing, 45 minutes, 50 minutes away. There are now 50 pickup spots in that little tiny Walmart parking lot. And you got to realize it's only 10 lanes of parking long, because they use one of them when they get all the deliveries for the summer stuff or whatever. You got like peat moss and rocks and all kind of garden stuff overflows out into the parking lot. So you got like 10 lines of traffic where you can actually drive in and park a car. They actually took away 1.5 of those and strung it all the way around the back of the building. They took away 10% of their parking space to convert it into the drive-in and pick-up parking. Now, for me, I'm shocked. I actually want to do a video on this later. I got the photos. But before I checked, it was 19 spots even during the height of COVID for that remote pickup where you order online, you come in, and then somebody will wheel the stuff out to you and you just throw it in your car and drive away. 19 at the maximum of COVID. They just put in 50 brand new ones here. Now, see, Ransom, the reason I was asking is I swear that I remember you telling me, and we talked about this a long time ago, that they eventually were going to cut off the stores and everything was going to be remote and everything was going to have to be delivered, and you were no longer going to be able to walk into the store physically. You'd have to buy everything online, and they were going to bring it out to your car. I never believed it. I was like, there's no way it's coming out to the remote countryside. It's impossible. They're never going to do it out here. It's too, and here I am with 50 pickup parking spots, 10% of the parking gone out of the Walmart parking lot in a place that has 1,000 or let's say 5,000 people maximum. This is spooking me a little bit here. I don't know. Do you recall that conversation? I'm just going to let you go with that thought.
Absolutely. And I even remember writing a big old thing about, for our notes thing about that. And we've been seeing that. And that kind of ties into like the communist store in Chicago where the mayor tried to take over the grocery business and open a grocery store. Of course, it failed because the government. But yes, I absolutely remember talking about that and linking it to flash mobs. Flash mobs that go in and steal bags and shoes and electronics. That is nothing compared to what will happen when there is no food. Those flash mobs will be even bigger. They'll be even more violent and ruthless, and you'll get trampled. It'll be like almost like if they spent years psychologically testing the behavior of people when it comes to scarcity and called it something like Black Friday. And then they stopped Black Friday, as you remember, during COVID. That's about when that ended. Not the sales, not the promotions, not the idea that you're actually getting something cheap, but really they hike the prices up all year. So you're really paying more than you used to. But they hide all that in this Black Friday event. But nobody stands outside the stores anymore after all the craziness, right? And it was right about that time. And yes, I remember saying this because I realized that they had changed the inside of the stores. They shortened the racks, less rows, less choices of food. And then on top of that, we learned through the app, that you could just order your food and you may or may not get what you ordered. But that's where all the good food's at. And I realized that Walmart was catering to people that only do online buying, who spend more money per visit than the average poor person that comes into the front door and shops, might get $100, $200 worth of groceries. These people are pulling up, buying $1,000 worth of groceries, $2,000 worth of groceries. And, like even if you want a small order, now they have it where you can do that too. So yes, they are definitely conditioning people to stop going inside, but to go outside. But beyond that, they've also started fixing the insides of the stores where there are literally no human cashiers at all. It's all self-checkout. And now for a special service, you can pay to go through that one line that they have in there that's supposed to be fast, and it has a human to help you bag your groceries and, check the stuff. That's what's going to open up at every store. And then that'll be outside that one lane where you come through and pick up stuff, and they just won't let you inside. It'll be a warehouse. Just imagine how people are going to act if there's an actual food shortage in any time in the near future. You think that they're freaking out over, iPads, iPhones, tennis shoes, bags, munchies at the corner store just because they're bored. Wait till the masses are just, burning things down and taking everything there is. Guess what? After that happens, then they start venturing out after the civilians. And all of that can happen really fast. We're talking real fast. The question is at what time point on their plan is that? And I think that's the overall business model. First, they got rid of customer service, so you can't call and complain or do nothing like that. You have to talk to an AI. And now they have it where there's less checkout people. You know, everybody is busy stocking or looking up something. They're not really at the front. But they do have the people to watch to see if you're just going to run out with stuff, but they're not going to stop you. They're just going to report you. But they're redesigning the whole industry to where you're going to find out that it's easier to just order online. And then think about that for people that live in the cities. They already are accustomed to having almost every food delivered to them, breakfast, lunch, and dinner if they eat it, and not even having food at their house. Half of them live in these little tiny living spaces that just don't really have the room to stockpile or, you know, look ahead. So those are millions of people that just don't have the room or the ability to actually plan ahead and have stuff. I hope they have go bags, and they can navigate their way out of the hellholes that will become the cities once an actual situation happens where the food is being rationed, and they have it all set up. That's the biometric system, the track and trace system, and you have to behave or you might not even get to go through the line and pick up your food there. And then who protects you once you leave the facility, right? Because you know they'll start guarding with police these food distribution centers. But what happens when you get your stuff and you try to leave? You're on your own? And with recent, activity with the government and prosecution, it seems like they're going out of their way to prosecute the victim and not the perpetrator of the crime, almost as if they want crime to spread and victims to know that they have to be victims and there's no, recourse for them to protect themselves because they're trying to abolish that. Why do they need to abolish that? Well, people like that own those things, they're not going to say, hey, you can just take my property. They're not going to say, you know what, you're not coming to take my food. And you know what? I'm not doing that. That's why they're doing that. They don't have to opt into the system. And, you made a point with all those videos. And I think you're actually dead center on the dumbing down of America and Western civilization program right there through the algorithm. You allow the algorithm to incrementally close the viewership of anybody that's giving actual information. And I think that's why it's good to talk about woo-woo, because you can throw ideas out there that in a month or two or a year or two will be considered, wrong speech, and you can't say it, and then you'll have that algorithm on you too. And you're right, they did target people that are, trying to self medicate, like any herbal anything. So you can't know about that. And you can't know about how to deal with animals because that's mean to the animals. All you can learn about is the new way that you can, take your government mandated vaccinations and medications in the future, if they ever get there. They haven't done that yet here, but we did see people go crazy all over the world with that power. Thank God they saved all those people. I'm glad that it all worked out according to the way they said it would.
Surely you jest, my friend. Surely you jest. Yeah, I was looking up some, Dennis sent me a couple articles here. It's like, hey, man, talk about this. 40 countries ready to join the BRICS in 2024. And for those of you who are unaware, the new members accepted just these last weeks were United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia. So you're looking at a lot of oil producers, and now Saudi Arabia is next on the block. So if Saudi Arabia joins the BRICS, then again, as we understand, the petrodollar would also be finished at that time. So probably the biggest news story of the year, which won't get much fanfare, but if you look back in history, eventually the largest story of the year will probably be if Saudi Arabia decides to join the BRICS nations and take payments for oil in anything other than exclusively U.S. dollars. At that point, that will signal the actual real, that will be the signal flare to the world that the U.S. dollar is finished as a reserve currency. Because we'll no longer have any military value to force all these countries to use dollars for oil or dollars for energy. And look at that and say, Because you when you were talking about the self-checkout thing, I jarred my memory because when I was there, I was waiting in the line for the person because they didn't want to go into the self-checkout, but they did put in 40 or so new checkout lanes inside there too. Because I remember when you went in, there was like 10 or something, maybe 12 in like this square. You walked in, it was a square. There, you even had to wait to go into the self-checkout place, which was ridiculous. Before, you never had to. But then, you jog my memory. Inside now, there's lanes for the self-checkout, not that square configuration anymore that they've acted. There's blue lights on it and kind of thing. And, you did, I think you're on center also with the go bags. Because I can't remember if I spoke about it when I came back from my trip, over the last week or so. Like my feeling and recollection of I was going to make this my last stand. Like you're not dragging me out of the house. Whatever happens, if people come out from the country, from the cities and things, this is where we're going to make our last stand out here. But as I looked at all these paintings over the last multi-centuries across Europe, from Italy to Croatia to Hungary, and also in Taiwan and Japan, like the paintings in the museums were just nothing but war scenes across centuries. And I realized that armies, even the most remotest spots, go everywhere. Even, like 1860s Civil War. I mean, they destroyed an enormous amount of Southeast U.S. The Union troops did. Then you go further afield and you look at the Austro-Hungarian Empire and you look at all the Prussians. You got just an enormous amount of fighting across everywhere, where even if you think way back in 1700s, 1600s, that you're in the most remotest place, you're never going to find, you're in the middle like the Sherwood Forest kind, they would still find out there. So for me, I'm thinking go bags, I've reconsidered. I was stocking a lot of things like, all right, this will be the last place. A lot of people will come out here. We got, some extra, camping supplies if people need to stay on property, this, that, and the other. Now I'm looking at how to be mobile. That's purely simple. Like, all right, I'm going to take that same cabin equipment, but like, how much of it do I need? What do I need? Can I get it all in a truck in 15 or 20 minutes? All the valuables, all the paperwork. Can I get it in a truck in under 30 minutes and get out of here? Because when armies start marching through your area, you might just want to be sitting there going, hey, man, hey, army, I'm just here growing veggies, man. Hey, go. You're going to get steamrolled over too. So at some point, I don't know the percentage, but I'm going to say at some point, there's a high probability that you may need to leave your place due to real danger. And it could be forest fires. It could be armies moving through. I'm not so worried about people coming out of the cities because everybody can take care of their own. And you got to realize how many country roads there are. Like the chance of somebody getting out of a city in a car and even making it out to your place, because there'll be so many broken down like cars that have run out of fuel that it'll be very difficult to transit out of the cities at that point. But even if they do get out in your countryside area, like how many country roads are there? And how many chances of them actually stopping on your property or in your front driveway or driving up your country road lane or whatever and actually getting out in front of your house? I mean, it's going to be just the luck of the draw if they do, because there's so many thousands and thousands of miles of country road with thousands of farms. I mean, where would they even consider stopping first? Like, oh, that one looks good. Like, how does the city folk how do they even decide what farm to go up and try to raid? You got to consider, like, City Slicker, my sister, love her to death, but she comes down the farm here, but she's a city girl. And just loves to play with the geese and ducks and stuff. But, think in that city mind frame. You're living in a neighborhood, you're living in a high rise, you're in a city. Okay, now you need to flee. Some have done a nuclear, it could be biological, it could be anything. But how does that person that has never been on a farm, doesn't know anything about the countryside, doesn't know how to hunt, fish, catch, clean, garden, do anything, like how do they even make the decision of where is a place to stop that might have resources? Gangs, they're pretty industrious. They look for houses that have electricity on at night. Like, oh, there's electricity on. There must be people home. We're going to go in there first. But if everything is dark, where do they go? If everybody put plastic garbage bags all over the windows and there's no light emanating out, it's just like a dark house. Like, how do they even know where to go? You got gangs coming out of, I don't know, Chattanooga. You got gangs coming out of Knoxville, whatever. Like, where are they going to go? Because they're going to get met with some stiff resistance. The first shot that gets fired, those guys, whatever happens, man, that's the thing. Whoever fires first doesn't win or move past that, because, that'll be the thing that shows the hostility. Like, how do you even choose where it might be a safe place to stop? Let's say you have to leave a city. Like, and you're a city, you only grew up in the city, and you only like, how do you even choose where a safe spot or you think is safe harbor for you to stop? Let alone have resources for food. I mean, just safety is going to be an issue at that point. I mean, I look at this and go like, all right, the chances of people getting out here, oh, it'll happen, it will. But again, just the mechanics and the metrics of it, of all, just like even people with the Rubik's Cube to get out here, turn left, turn right, turn right, turn left, turn right, turn left. You go up the gravel driveway 1,000 feet and then go into David's back property and you'll find him back there. Like, you know, it just doesn't make sense, like how a lot of these people are even going to find their way out for safety. Like of the total population, Ransom, how many of them do you think will actually make it out to the countryside to even have a chance to look for resources? Like on a general, Chicago empties out, they can go north, south, east, or west. Like how many of those thugs and hoodlums are going to end up out in the countryside? I'm curious. I'm just curious what you think about the percentages.
I think it'd be less than 10% of people you would have to worry about came out of the cities. Most of them are going to wait there for help to come because they don't know what else to do. And that's what most people in cities do. And here's the first piece of advice on what you do if you live in a city and this kind of scenario might happen. Don't live in a city in the first place. You shouldn't be living there. Obviously, things are going to go bad those places. If you're gambling that everything is going to be all right, then fine, stay there. But let's think about these options here. If we're talking about just, civilization falling apart into a chaotic riot, dog-eat-dog scenario where the military and police forces of the world are not involved, then I think the rural area people will be fine. They'll continue to grow food. They'll protect themselves. They have most of the guns. They have most of the ammunition. They have most of the space. They have most of the know-how. A good portion of them are veterans that fought in wars, or their parents or grandparents were, and they learned things from them. The same goes for those, people in the city that have a similar, background and knowing stuff. They'll know that they need to leave and they'll be ready and they'll get out. That'd be like less than 10%. But let's talk about what if it's not just the everyday average, human out there trying to figure out what's going on because everything's turned off or whatever. So human civilians, I wouldn't worry about the cities too much unless you live in one. But if you live out somewhere else, I think you'll be fine. If you know how to navigate nature, you'll be fine. But what if it's not civilians that are coming after you? In some kind of post-event situation. The idea that people are going to go just hide out in the wilderness or out on a dirt road or whatever, that's silly. They have technology now, and we've been talking about it for the last 2 hours. Artificial intelligence. Yeah, they're going to use all these tools with their bots and different things, and they're going to fly out there. And guess what you look like in a FLIR camera? You look like a Christmas light just sitting out there. They know exactly where you're at. There's all kinds of other ways to know that, not to mention that every single resource in the Western world has been marked and identified. So as an example, when the annular eclipse came over, I found a spot that was the most remote on the map. I took my family there to get away from crowds or people. And guess what? There was 50 other people that had the same idea. So if you think you know a creek or a pond or, a watering hole or a well or some kind of resource, guess what? There's 50 to other 100 people that also know that spot, and you're going to come across those people. So if it's military or some kind of police force or organized people with technology, those rural people are going to have a hard time. They're basically sitting ducks at that point. They're easy to find from the air. All the routes are actually in databases. It's not like, they don't have that kind of information and maps don't exist anymore. So if they have any kind of logistics, that's not good for the civilian. Let's put it that way. Now, let's talk about if it's a non-human force that's coming out. So strictly robotic, to go find those outliers that are still trying to grow stuff and hunt out there. Again, you'll be lit up like Christmas tree lights out there. Between satellites and robotics, you'll be found very fast. And just think about all of the manhunts that go on. If you've ever, read a story about people that escape from The government, they almost always find them, and they have every resource behind them to do that. So it's kind of a joke that you would do that. Now, if it's even more than that, than just robotics or human forces, you don't stand a chance out there. Like I said before, any kind of technology that you know about or we have, if it was a non-human force, you would expect that technology to be a little bit more advanced. So let's go ahead and put the elite, black budget, Illuminati type, figures in that category. They have more technology. So if it's something that the governments are dealing with, there's not going to be much hope for those people hiding out. Now, if it's something natural that just takes down everybody, governments included, then I think the rural people are going to form a new agriculture society, an agrarian society, and they're going to be fine. It's the people in the cities that are people that will be left in coffins when the water, the electricity, and every human comfort gets turned off. Basically, it's a big roach motel with a bunch of people that are going to be preying on anyone else left there. Or then you got your option of the FEMA camp or, concentrated camping areas provided by any leftover, government forces. And I would say I wouldn't want to be in one of those areas either.
Roaches check in, but they don't check out. Is that the roach motel you're speaking of? If the barbed wire is facing inward in a place that you get taken to, you're in the wrong place. Barbed wire facing outward is to keep people from outside coming in. So if you get on somewhere and then they're like, hey, come for the food, come for the safety, we'll give you a nice warm sleeping bag. And you get there and the barbed wire is facing inward with the top of the fence, so you can't climb out of there. Welcome to the Roach Motel. Be wary of what you eat or drink.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Oh man, please do.
I brought up this idea of the technology that's at hand right now. I'm showing a article right now. Scientists can now read your mind. AI turns people's thoughts into images. And you think about that, plus the one I showed last week where they could get, text out of it. Say, your cousin Bob's living at your house and you needed a little extra work because, society's collapsing. But they've designated certain peoples as a threat. What happens if Bob gets caught in town, trying to trade something for salt or silver or whatever it is? Well, they might just take Bob into a room and hook him up to a machine that shows them where you live, that says where you're at, that just, snitches get stitches. But what if they can't help themselves because they're not even talking? They're just being asked questions and the machines are pulling that information out. I forgot it or lost it or whatever, but I had another article that was talking about the U.S. government and how they're going to be using these kind of technologies to find out if people are committing espionage. So I thought I would just add that in there, that, even the random family member or friend, maybe, telling the government or whatever forces hold this technology where you're at, what you have, and where you're hiding and what you're doing there. It's, just a little more for that nightmare future society idea there.
Well, give me a couple more sleeping pills because the nightmare continues. Remember Flash Gordon, the old original Flash Gordon, 1980s, I believe. They had the one scientist and then they opened his eyes and the machine looked in and it tries to extract all of your memories and erase your brain. And then he pretended like he had an erased brain, but then he was faking the whole time. And then when he popped back up, they're like, how'd you remember? How'd you survive the machine? And the guy's like, I was thinking of everything as fast as I could. I was thinking of any lecture, any formula, any kind of mathematical equations. The thing, I just kept thinking of things and giving it as much as it wanted, as fast as I could think. Because right now that AI can read your mind, supposedly, because you're focused on a thought, so it's holding that pattern for a minute so it can kind of like hone in on you. But if you were to do the same thing, if you're going to start to think like 50 million things at the same time, like some schizophrenic ADD person that could think 65 thoughts at a time, naming off just cities, naming off countries, thinking about songs, trying to sing, look at movies, recall whatever, recipes, anything. as that AI was trying to read your mind of the actual thought, even though they stuck you in the room like that and you were throwing out so much thought that you overwhelmed the machine. I wonder if that would then give off a false reading of everything that, but if you try to hold on to it, no, I'm not going to show you where the silver stash is or whatever you're talking. I'm not going to show you where Bob's salt stash is, and you're holding on to that one thought, then the machine would have a much greater chance on honing in on that laser precision of that one thought of the salt stash, for a better term, versus giving it the Encyclopedia Britannica and just firing off the encyclopedia at the thing while it tried to probe your brain. I don't know, man. I'm just throwing a woo-woo out there because it is kind of one of those nights.
Well, you could try the breathe in, breathe out method, or maybe you should, everybody listening to this broadcast should pick up a pocket constitution and read that thing over and over and over again until you have it memorized. So if you ever end up like Bob in that chair, hooked to a machine with a bunch of guys with guns waiting to get an answer from you, you can, you can go breathe in, breathe out, and start reading the Constitution.
Article number 1. Oh, bring it. Give me that cursive. Bring back that script that's disappearing. Imagine if you're like, you can read Egyptian hieroglyphs. They'll bring you in a time machine, a piece of paper 6,000 years from the past, so you can read the cursive. Oh. Let the time machines fly. We'll see you again next week. David DuByne, Ransom Godwin, signing off.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
This is Mysteries in the Histories. A mysterious manuscript, roughly 250-page book written in an entirely unknown language and writing system. It's been carbon dated back to the 1400s and includes illustrations of plants that don't resemble any known species, believed to have been intended as a medical text. It's named for the Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912. This is the mystery of the Voynich manuscript. Since its discovery in 1912, the 15th century Voynich manuscript has been a strange, mysterious cult phenomenon captivating the minds of many. Its first confirmed owner was Georg Barisch, from 1585 to 1662, an alchemist from Prague, who discovered it in his library. Barisch tried to investigate the manuscript's origins to no avail. The manuscript, full of handwriting in an unknown language, zodiac symbols, naked women, and strange objects like unknown plants, seemed to be from another time, or even another world. For centuries, this book repeatedly changed hands. When it was purchased by Voynich, who posited that it was authored by Albertus Magnus, an alchemist, or Roger Bacon, an early scientist. People believed that Voynich himself fabricated the manuscript, although that theory wouldn't explain the carbon dating of the paper and ink to the 15th century. The book itself bears no indication of its authors, about 6 inches by 9 inches, and around 232 pages decorated, not unlike others in the illuminated age. Wrapped in vellum, with vellum pages, the manuscript features 116 folded folios bound in 18 bundles. The binding of the book is old and busted, though it is not original to the text. Many of the pages are fold-outs, some are missing. Inside the tome are innumerable lines of looping text, inked in iron gall in a medium typical of the Middle Ages. Scribbled in a strange, unfamiliar language and a strange, unfamiliar script, incomprehensible, causing Voynich to conclude that the tome was written in code. Alongside the text, unknown if important or decorative, there is an abundance of illustrations and pictorial art. Composed of inks and pigments in tones and color palettes common to the 1400s, these illustrations seem to split the manuscript into 4 separate sections, including sections about botany, astronomy and astrology, balneology, the science of the therapeutic use of baths, and pharmacology, as well as a 5th and final section, with blocks of text separated by stars. The first and largest section of the manuscript is the botany section that contains detailed drawings of plants as if from another world or a lost continent, plants no one can identify and no one has ever seen before. The astronomy and astrology section has illustrations of the stars, the sun and the moon alongside several zodiac signs. Immersed in strange, shared baths, female figures frolic through the pages of the text's balneological section, while the pharmaceutical section is filled with what appears to be medicinal plants, indicated by the inclusion of medicinal bottles throughout this fantastical illustration. Like Voynich, many modern scholars suspect that the manuscript's text is a ciphered form of a familiar language, with their theories of the tome's latent linguistics flitting from Latin to Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs and Toltecs of Mexico. Others say that the text is an artificial language or strange shorthand, and others still see the text as meaningless scribbles. The theories of the tome are, thus, all over the place, with no one opinion snagging widespread support. The Voynich manuscript continues to mystify medievalists and confuse cryptologists centuries after its supposed creation. It remains as impenetrable and inexplicable as ever. But is this truly one of the mysteries in the histories? A book on female maintenance? Maybe. Want to see the full episode? Sign up for the show notes and the link will be in next week's email.
Ransom Godwin at Mountain High Time is locked in a basement writing new episodes to keep your addiction to mysteries facilitated.
Signing up for the show notes, you get behind-the-scenes thoughts and points we sometimes can't relay over social media platforms. Brought to you by ITM Trading. ITM Trading has spent the last 28+ years developing a team of expert researchers and gold and silver analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn. 866-834-1422. That's 866